بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أما بعد أحبتي في الله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته أسأل الله كريم رب العرش العظيم أن يتولنا في الدنيا والآخرة. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the Almighty accepts our good and forgives our evil, protects us from kulli su makruh, blesses us with ikhlas, with thabat, ala sunnat nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Habati fillah, question was asked, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I hope this message finds you well. Ustad Dr. Green, may Allah protect you and preserve you, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect and preserve you as well. I'm aware that this is your specialty in dealing with such matters, encountering extremists. If a revert brother or sister claims that they currently listen to or have been past listeners of controversial speakers, such as Anwar, Awlaki, or Musa, Jibril, should they be completely boycotted and not married? How can a layperson advise them? Jazakallah khairan wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First and foremost, there are many things to unpack here, ahabati fillah. So, one of the things that's very important, as the questioner mentions, a revert brother or sister claims they have currently listened to or have been past listeners of controversial speakers. And then the aforementioned speakers were mentioned. One of the things that we do have to consider in light of this is, first and foremost, that they're reverts, okay? That they have come to Islam. They left disbelief. Maybe they were Hindus, maybe they were Sikhs, maybe they're Christian, maybe they didn't believe in anything, and now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guided them to Islam. So that is something which is very important to consider when and how you deal with the people, the mu'amalat of how you deal with people. That means they are investigating their new faith. They are listening to wherever they find some benefit. They find some Islamic benefit. They find some guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through certain individuals and certain speakers. Even if there could contain harm, they don't have the tools to distinguish between haqq and batil. So that's very important for us to understand and to consider when answering and approaching such an issue. So, meaning that if they don't have those tools, how are they blameworthy? How is it that you could even think about boycotting someone who doesn't have the tools to distinguish between haqq and batil, between truth and falsehood? That's number one. Secondly, we also have to consider that the concept or this mas'ala, this issue of boycotting, is a Sharia-based mas'ala. It is a Sharia-based mas'ala. Meaning that you cannot implement this issue without dawabit, without criterion, without conditions, shurut, without understanding that there are mu'ani, things that prohibit making a hukm on someone or something, especially in the issues of takfir and the issue of tabdi' and tafsiq and things of this nature. And more specifically, because the scholars do differ with these conditions and implementing them depending on the mas'ala, but definitely with the issue of takfir. So what this means is when you're talking about boycotting an individual, you cannot boycott an individual based on your desires, based on your cliquishness, based on hizbiyah, based on your feelings and emotion. La. You're boycotting. The concept of hajr is a Sharia-based issue, meaning that the issue itself is built upon something. Mabni ala maslaha wa mafsada. That this issue, we have to look at it in light of the Sharia, looking at the harms and benefits. Is there a greater harm than a benefit of implementing this when we're talking about implementing it under certain circumstances? So, for example, you have mentioned that these are new Muslims. I can't think of a concept where it would be a benefit, where we even have to go into depth in the issue. When you're talking about a new Muslim, someone who just left kufr, okay? And, maybe a revert, if you're talking about they've been a Muslim for years or something like this, and they have knowledge, that's different. But from your wasf, so from your description, you have mentioned that these individuals are new reverts to Islam. So I can't think of an issue, a time nor a place or an issue in general, and I can't tasawwur this, where you're going to find benefit in boycotting someone who's a new Muslim. No. Rather, they need to be taught. They need the knowledge shared with them. They need the guidance, and they need to be brought to that which is good. So that's the first thing. Secondly, perhaps there's another scenario that you're talking, that in the situation of an individual who can benefit from boycotting. So, for example, this could be a person, they're a Muslim, and that they, by boycotting them for something in the Sharia, which is, has to do with sinfulness, or that they are, constantly with someone of bid'ah or something like this, then, and you see that there's a greater maslaha than mafsada. There's a greater benefit than harm. For example, maybe this individual has a high regard for you. They respect you as a person of knowledge, and they love to benefit from your study circles. And you see, and you've warned them constantly, that this individual that you're going to has great harm in the religion. They are deviant in the religion. You should not be associating with them and benefiting from them. Okay, and then they continue to do so. And you have a good, overwhelming belief that it's going to benefit them by you no longer trying with them, and you maybe boycott them. Again, this is a hypothetical scenario. So I'm giving you that there are some cases, but mostly not, where they're going to say, by you no longer giving them salams, that they're actually going to benefit from that and come to the sunnah, or, leave off listening to extreme Sufi or some other person from Ahl Bid'ah. Meaning, mostly the scenario you've given me as a description is not beneficial. I cannot think of a situation, even if I told a person 10 times, don't listen to Muhammad Jibril, or whatever his name is, Jibril. Don't listen to Anwar Awlaki. Okay. 10 times I told them, okay? I'm not going to boycott them. That's just how I'm going to practice this method. I'm not going to boycott them because I don't see the Sharia maqsad being implemented. I don't see that I have to be a controller of who they listen to. Rather, I can advise them. Because again, this concept of hajr is built upon looking at the harms and benefits, and that there is going to be either a benefit of bringing them back to the good, and that they are going to leave the harm, or that you are being protected from their harm, which, if someone's listening to Awlaki, that doesn't harm me. It has nothing to do with me, unless it's in my household, it's my children. But it doesn't have a harm for me. If my best friend is listening to somebody from Ahl Bid'ah, la yudurni, it doesn't harm me. So for that maqsad of hajr, there is no benefit. So in this issue, aslan, I don't see where there's going to be much benefit by you making hajr. Rather, I see that you are making, you advise them, and continue to advise them. As far as mixing and so forth, if they are listening to a group of people of bid'ah and they want you to, then yeah, I say then you don't sit with them in that sense. That doesn't mean you have to negate giving them salams. So we don't want to make this mas'ala with takhlit. We don't want to mix this issue. And what I mean by mixing this issue is most of the time when we're talking about hajr, we're talking about the people of Ahl Bid'ah. We're talking about the people of Fisk. And we're talking about the people of, who've left Islam or something like this, that they are either a major sinner or they're a person of innovation, and you've looked at these criterion and you see that there's a greater benefit by making hajr of them than there is by mixing with them in some form or fashion. So that's what we do have to understand, is usually when we're talking about hajr and we're talking about the kutub as-salaf, we're talking about those classical texts, they're talking about dealing with the people of either a fisq, but generally you're seeing the people of bid'ah, and the people of bid'ah غالبا of mughallada, like they have extreme bid'ah. They're Jahmi, they're Qadari, they're from the Murji'ah, they are Takfiri. I mean, like they really have a big bid'ah in the religion. That doesn't take them out of the fold of Islam necessarily, but it means that these mubtadi'ah have a great harm or can spread their bid'ah, or the person doesn't want to be seen with these people who are on this methodology which contravenes or goes against the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam wa madhhab as-salaf as-salih ridwanullahi alayhim. So getting back to your specific issue, I think we've answered that especially with a new Muslim or something like this, and I honestly don't go to anyone's tapes and books, and even if they're telling me, I don't, I might advise them if it's appropriate, but I'm not going to say, oh, you listen to Yasser Qadhi on that tape, I'm not going to give you salams anymore. No, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't seem to have muwafaqa with what we've studied with ulama. That's not what I study. Maybe some other people studied something different with some other mashayikh, I don't know. But that's not what we studied. We're looking at these things with ilm wa fiqh wa basira, that these things take insight and they take analysis and they yurattib alayhi ahkam. They have an effect on people's lives. I cannot think of an issue where I need to look at someone's tapes. Even I know people, all kind of people, and they might say, well, I like the Deobandi sometimes, and I like to listen to some Ashari sometimes, and I also like Ahlul Sunnah, and they do this. I'm not going to make hajr of them. Rather, I'm going to advise them, and that's what I do. So it's very important to know when it comes to this issue of boycotting that it's a serious issue, and it's not a light issue. Again, looking at the harms and the benefits. Let me also give you some of the harms. When you're dealing with new Muslims, a lot of times, you say, oh, this person has an earring, and we've warned him, we advised him 5 times. Okay, he just accepted Islam 2 weeks ago, and you're telling him to take the earring out, and now you're going to boycott him. Well, you've now made him leave Islam. Basically, that's what is the reality in many of those scenarios. So that's why it takes wisdom and fiqh in implementing these masail, and they're not based on our desires. They're not based on just we read some athar and we're trying to apply it how we understand it. No, these things, it takes context. It takes darasa. It takes studying with the ulama and how they taught these masail, as well as these athar of the salaf. So that's very important. So again, the harms in most of those scenarios are going to be much greater than there's going to be benefit as far as boycotting. Naam. So advise them. And then you said, another issue that you mentioned, you said, or have listened to. You cannot penalize someone because they have listened to someone from Ahl Bidah. That honestly makes 0 sense. I don't understand why that would be an issue. You don't go, many of us did not come to Islam on the path of Salafiyah. I was involved before Islam, really looking at the Nation of Islam, looking at this and black nationalism, all kind of other things. And after embracing Islam, I didn't know much. So I could, anybody who was my Muslim brother, I was going to hang out with. And the guy who took me to his house the first night, literally the day I took my Shahada in the masjid, was a Sufi, which I found out later. And he told me some weird practices. Come on over. Okay, my brother. And I go over. He gives me a book with some guy with no beard and and he was telling me all these dhikrs. Hey, let's dim the light. Say Allahu, 200 times and do this and do that. And this was strange things, and it made me wonder, well, am I accepting the right religion? Because I didn't know that it was about turning off the lights with another man, and we're going to make these athkar. I didn't know that was what Islam was. So my point is the new Muslim is fragile. The new Muslim needs to be taught and understanding. And so that means if we were to apply that, most of us, I know how many mashayikh that are known as sword bearers of the sunnah now, who used to listen to Sayyid Qutb, who listened to all kind of takfiris, and who enjoyed this and the books of this one, and that makes no sense about what somebody was upon, okay, and what they listened to before. So that really doesn't have any bearing on this issue, whether it was Awlaki or whether it was Jibril or whoever it was. And then you mention a whole nother mas'ala, should they be married or not? I also don't understand necessarily the concept. If someone was listening to such and such and they made tawbah from being a hardcore takfiri, then they've made tawbah from a deviant aqidah. So alhamdulillah, they're on khair now, bi'idnillah. So this issue of nikah is also similar to what we discuss, and people will make their own decisions about who to marry and who not to marry. However, I would say, if when it comes to marriage, that if you are dealing with someone and they are listening, then I would be advising that person, and I would advise the sister or whoever is going to marry and say, hey, so-and-so is listening to a lot of extremists, takfiris, this and that and the other, or mubtadi'ah that are on other things. So that does need to be made known. And the last point, you said, how can a lay person advise them? So all of us, as the Prophet ﷺ has said, ad-din an-nasiha, the religion is sincere advice. We all have a role to the extent of our knowledge and ability. Meaning, if you don't have knowledge, if you don't have the ability, well, then you don't advise someone with that which you don't have. But if you know something about Tawheed, you advise them in regards to Tawheed. If you know something that's thabit about a person of Ahl Bid'ah, then you can share that with them and say, well, Talib al-Ilm so-and-so or Sheikh so-and-so has warned us against so-and-so for these reasons, and that's why I'm advising you, my brother. And don't be hasty to take people off the sunnah, and hasty to boycott people, and hasty to fall into, to try to implement these masail without having wisdom and wara, and having some taqwa, some fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, so the layperson, finally I'll say, the layperson, their role is not in these issues of making tabdi and tafsik and takfir of people. That is not the role. That is a role of people of knowledge. And even I would say that is not the role of the beginning student of knowledge, and or someone who's not grounded in those areas, to say so-and-so is a mubtadi'ah and so-and-so is this, and warn against this and that. Unfortunately, people do that anyway, but it's not our role. And many of the ulama from the contemporaries who mention this very clearly and succinctly, two scholars I can think of right off now, Imam Salih bin Fawzan, hafidhullah ta'ala, also Imam Abdulaziz al-Raji in Riyadh, hafidhullah ta'ala, wa and many of the ulama mention this. Imam Salih Suhaimi, Imam Abdul Basan al-Abad, Shaykhna Sheikh Ibrahim al-Rahili, Sheikh Sulaiman al-Rahili, وكثير علمائنا في Yemen, Sheikh Muhammad al-Imam, and so many have warned and written about these masail, and also let us know that that is not the role of the new Muslim, and that is not the role of the beginning student of knowledge, and to even get involved in those affairs. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the Almighty to accept our good and forgive our evil. Wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad.